Welcome to this video on Microsoft Dynamics NAV, getting started with source code management. In this video, you will see how easy it is to get started with source code management and gain a good understanding on how to manage standard releases from Microsoft, which form the basis for your development. The demo today is based on Visual Studio Team Services and Visual Studio 2015. If you don't already have an account for Visual Studio Team Services, you can get started for free at visualstudio.com. Visual Studio 2015 is included in most MSDN subscriptions. We will begin by looking at some of the considerations you need to make before starting with source code management, and how to structure your code in your source code management system. These considerations are independent of what source code repository you have selected to use. We will also look at how you can automate some of these things, and of course this is done by PowerShell. At the end, we'll go through a selection of PowerShell scripts that can serve as a starting point for you. Regional settings are very important because of the way TXT files are exported from Dynamics NAV. Things like dates and times are formatted in the text file based on your regional settings. So it is recommended that all developers run with English United States settings. Other factors such as your code page can also be affected if not all developers use the same regional settings. Captions is another consideration. Many places developers are working on regional versions with all language layers included in the code. This is not best practice. Translations in code are two different things and should be kept and managed apart. Developers should only be working with ENU, as this is the only common language for all versions, including W1. All other captions should be managed on their own by the different translation teams. You should source code manage all of your objects, translations, help files, and your PowerShell scripts. There are of course other things that you could include here too, but this is a good start for your Microsoft Dynamics NAV development. Some things like the application object properties should not be tracked in your development. However, we need this information when we build a new version later on. We can resolve this by tracking both the complete release from Microsoft and the development branch cleaned of this information. Now let's look at how we do this in practice. This is Visual Studio 2015, and I'm connected to Visual Studio Team Services with my account Dynamics NAV. As you can see here, I've created a team project called Microsoft Dynamics NAV, and in that I have 2016 as being my 2016 versions of Dynamics NAV, and under that I have NA and W1, which is the two country versions I've chosen to track here. We can now start to drill down into the folder structure, which works the same way as File Explorer. I've created folders here for the different versions of 2016, starting with RTM and up to Cumulative Update 7, which is the latest release at the time of this recording. As you can see, the build number has been included in the folder structure. This is a great reference for developers to quickly identify what release a specific build is, but also ensures the folder structure is sorted nicely. Under each release, folders have been created. One is Base App, which contains all objects as released by Microsoft. Dev App is another, which contains the objects cleaned of application object properties as well as all language layers except ENU. The code in this branch is what all developers should use as a starting point for any new development. There's also a folder for your help files, which we will not talk about here. The branch called Languages contain all of our language layers exported as individual files. This ensures they can be easily managed by our translation team. Last but not least, we have a branch hosting our PowerShell scripts specific to this release. Let's see how an automated setup of Cumulative Update 6 would look like. As we can see, Cumulative Update 6 is currently empty. In Cumulative Update 3, we already have the PowerShell scripts we need to make this happen. Let's take a copy of the PowerShell branch and paste that into Cumulative Update 6. We now have two files in the PowerShell folder. One with the settings for the specific user account we're using, the other that contains the script needed to create the structure as described before. The script does the following. First, we read the settings file and get all the defaults. Based on these settings, we do export of all the objects from the database described in the settings file as txt. Once we have that, we split the txt file and place the files in the base app folder. Then we export all 4 languages located in the North American version and place them in the correct folder. We then create a new folder called devapp as a copy of base app. And in that folder we remove all language layers except ENU and all object application properties from the files in the folder. Let's start the script and see what happens. The script takes a few minutes to run, so let's skip to the result. As you can see, the folder structure has now been created and all the folders are in place. Now all we need to do is add the folders and files created by the PowerShell script to the source code management system. Now we do that by clicking the Add Items to Folders button, selecting all the folders and clicking Next. This will bring out the list of all the objects that are about to be added. And we can click Finish, and the system will now add them to the source code management system. The files have now been added to our local workspace and can now be committed to our central repository. Now let's take a quick look at the PowerShell scripts making this all happen. The central script we executed is split into sections as described earlier. First, we load the settings file. Then it connects to the database and exports all objects to txt. The objects are then split and placed in the base app folder. The language layers are exported for each object and placed in the language folder. A copy is made of the base app files and placed in the devapp folder. At the end, all language layers and object application properties are removed from the objects in the devapp folder. The settings file is individual to each user and sets a number of default variables the remaining functions require. It also loads the standard PowerShell DLLs and imports any functions created and stored in the PowerShell team project, created and managed by your team. So let's look what we have covered in this session about Microsoft Dynamics NAV and getting started with source code management. We have covered what we should consider and which things are important to consider before you start with source code management. We have looked at how you can structure your code in your source code management system. We have looked how you can automate your import structure, and we have looked at how this can be done via PowerShell scripts. And more readiness resources at PartnerSource. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. We look forward to see you back for more.